Hello, and welcome to Old Toy, New Joy, the show where I share with you my previously enjoyed toys I purchased from online sources, thrift stores, and collector's shows that once belonged to someone else. Just yesterday, I went to a local collector's show. I hadn't been there in about 3 years. They hadn't had it because of the pandemic and what have you, so it was very exciting to be back there, and I found some cool things that I'm going to share with you probably in my next video. But one of the things I found were some parts of some old Hasbro G.I. Joes that I've been looking for so that I could put together a custom Hawk from Buck Rogers. Here's my complete Mego 1979 Buck Rogers action figure collection. Mego put out 9 figures. I've talked about these figures a few times now on Old Toy New Joy, but I always wanted a Hawk figure. They never made one. Hawk was a character played by Christopher Thome in the second season and last season of Buck Rogers in the 25th century. So Mego never made a figure, but I always felt that they needed one. And I decided I wanted to put one together that looked like the other figures. If Mego was to make a figure, this is probably how they would do it. So we'll take a look at the parts I picked up, and we'll see if I can make a Hawk custom figure from them. So at the collector's show today, there was a vendor who was selling loose G.I. Joe parts. Legs, arms, the crotch piece, heads, torsos of various figures, because a lot of guys who collect G.I. Joe have maybe one imperfect part or missing part to a G.I. Joe figure that they'd like to replace. And this was perfect for me because I realized that to make my custom Hawk from the Buck Rogers series, I probably needed some crystal ball parts and some Raptor parts. So I have a Raptor head. I took off the headdress, and I think that this looks a lot like Christopher Thome, who played Hawk in the Buck Rogers television series in the second season. I never made a figure of him, right? So I just got to take this this metal model file, and get rid of the paint around his eyes, fill in his head, and paint the top white to make it look like feathers. I'll use Crystal Ball's chest piece, spray paint it black with this can of black glossy paint. Same with the back. I got Raptor's arms that have some feathers on them. That'll work nicely. This crotch piece from an old Cobra Viper. I had a spare one that wasn't in great shape, but this part is fine. Here's the legs from Crystal Ball. So these will be okay. These will work. Spray paint everything black. Leave the skin and the chest there. And it should look good. We have an original O-ring from a G.I. Joe, so we'll try to use that. If it snaps, I'll just use some rainbow loom elastics like I have in my other action figure repairs. And we've got the original little screw here too. And here's what our loose parts look like with a few coats of shiny black acrylic paint on them. I thought that'd be the best color to go with. And here's the head sculpt. And all I gotta do is put them all together. And here's our finished product. This is my custom Hawk from Buck Rogers, and I wanted him to look like Mego might have made him in 1979 if they decided to make a Hawk figure. So I didn't go too detailed on the body because as we'll see in a moment when I compare him with the other Mego Buck Rogers figures, the real Mego Buck Rogers figures, they didn't usually put a ton of detail in the body, especially if they were going to spend that time, money, and effort to put detail elsewhere. So they would have had to put some detail and energy into the head sculpt, which is what I've done. Got a close up here. I had to make it look like there's black feathers on his head. There we go. And little bits of feather. It's supposed to look like his head's all made out of feathers. But I didn't want to go too fancy, too glossy, because again, the Mego didn't put as much into their figures in the late 70s as Hasbro did in the early 80s. And so I wanted to make it realistic. And as you'll see, the rivets are exposed. I painted over them and then scraped the paint off because the Buck Rogers figures at that time did not have painted rivets, even though G.I. Joe figures often did. He's shiny, but it looks good. I also didn't have any skin showing on his chest. That would have been too much detail, I think. So Crystal Ball had skin on his chest showing. I painted that black. And here's a picture on my phone of Christopher Thome playing Hawk in the TV show. And here's my figure. So here's my Hawk figure amongst the other figures. I'm going to have to redo this display, obviously. Twiki's too low to have Hawk there. But I think he fits in quite nicely. Let's take a closer look. I think he works out. He's a little shiny, but I think he looks good, and I think he's a nice addition to the collection. So thank you so much for tuning in to Old Toy New Joy today and allowing me to share my custom Hawk action figure. If you liked the video, please like the video, and we will keep them coming. In the meantime, I encourage you to visit other episodes of Old Toy New Joy. You might see something that sparks your interest, something that sparks a memory, something that gets you wanting to collect, such as Transformers, G.I. Joe, Buck Rogers, comics, He-Man, wrestling figures, Star Wars, Hot Wheels, and much, much more. Until next time, this is your Toy Whisperer saying farewell from Old Toy New Joy.